Welcome to the Known Victory Church YouTube channel. We are so glad that you found us today. We exist to make Jesus known and to be a place that anyone can call home. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe, like, and share these messages so we can truly make Jesus known in our homes, cities, and across the world. We pray that this message impacts you and helps you to grow closer to Jesus.
But we're in the middle of our final series here at this location as Known Victory Church. As you all know, we're moving into a new season, which is kind of crazy how fast things have been kind of going. But we are excited for what God is going to do. But as we all know, as we've been talking about the past 3 weeks, we're in this series called The Attitudes of Egypt. Right? We're talking about transition. We're talking about change. We're talking about the new. We're talking about life. When we go through life, how many of y'all know things change? Things don't always stay the same. Sometimes we wish things stayed the same. We wish that gas prices stayed the same, right? We wish that house prices stayed the same. We wish that grocery prices stayed the same. But things change. And transition and change and the new, they can be hard. As much as we might be excited about something, they might be challenging, and we're talking about how the attitudes that Israel had as they left Egypt, as they were stepping into the future, as they were stepping into the new that God had for them. There were some attitudes they had that we sometimes have in our own lives, some attitudes that come up. And so we've been going through some of these attitudes that Israel had on their journey out of Egypt as they stepped into the promised land. And we all know Egypt wasn't where Israel was supposed to be. In fact, it was hard. It was challenging. It was cruel and grueling work that they were forced to do. But God had much bigger plans for them. And I think about in our lives, and I'm not just talking about our church transition, but in our own lives. There's moments in our life where we go through transitions and we look back at the past. And we forget sometimes all the things God is doing currently, right? Israel, during Egypt, as they left, they had forgotten some of the things that God had done. They had maybe forgotten some of the miracles, some of the provision and the guidance that they still had from God. But these attitudes started to come in. And so far, we've looked at two of these attitudes. Number one is the comfort attitude. We talked about it 2 weeks ago. How when we look at our lives, we like to be comfortable. How we spend money on our beds. How we spend money on our favorite chair. We like to make sure that we're comfortable. And there's nothing wrong really with being comfortable unless comfort gets in the way of God's promise, which does happen. Or we like what used to be more than what is to come. And so we tend to step back to where we used to be because it's more comfortable, predictable, and we think it's better even if it's not. And then we looked at the complaining attitude last week. Talked about complaining. If y'all remember, we talked about all the complaining that we like to do as people. Why? Because complaining's fun. We like it. It's nice to be in a room of people who are just as mad at you and mad with you about something at work. And complaining, it spreads because it's so easy, right? Our boss sucks. You're like, yeah, you know what? He does suck, And then you start getting building up and you're like, man, our boss is the worst human on the planet. It's like he didn't even do anything yet, That's how it's kind of like a snowball effect when it comes to complaining. And these attitudes tend to come up when we're in the new, we're stepping into the new, or the things in transition that are coming up. And we like to look back and see our past as comfortable, and we like to complain about our future, and we look at our past as if it's so much better. But this morning we're going to go through the next attitude. So we've gone through we've gone through, like I said, comfort attitude and the complaining attitude. But today is the comparing attitude. This is an attitude that is very dangerous, comparing attitude. I grew up in the Calgary area. I grew up, around Calgary and Cochrane. That's where I went to high school. And that's where I grew up. I went to church, Calgary area. And I love that area. I love that area. Why? Because when I lived in Cochrane, I could go to Canmore in 30 minutes and have lunch, So we missed that part of this. But this weekend, my mom and her 2 sisters are here. We got half the family here. My mom and her 2 sisters. And they came up and they went to Jasper. Now, Jasper is not a place I've been to a lot in my life. Growing up near Calgary, why would we go to Jasper when Canmore and Banff are so much closer? So we did go a few times, but when I was a child, I didn't remember. And I knew they were going. They were going Thursday night to Jasper. And I remember the whole past week, Beth and I were talking about, should we join them in Jasper for the day on Friday? Should we go with them? Should we leave early in the morning and go? And we never really made a decision. And all of a sudden, it's Thursday at 5 o'clock. And I'm like, are we going to Jasper or not? And then we have this conversation. And then I find out you can sleep in your vehicle at the Freezin' Bros in Hinton. And so what I decided to do, literally 5:40, I can check my phone, 5:40, I call Hinton Freezin' Bros. I'm like, hey, can I sleep do you have overnight parking? They're like, yeah, we do. And I'm like, perfect. And so me and Jane and Marin, we drove to Hinton at like 8 o'clock on Thursday night, and we slept in the parking lot of Freeze and Bros so we could be to Jasper in the morning. We got to my mom's hotel at like 8 in the morning. And I'm telling you, it was awesome. We loaded the back full of blankets and pillows, and I think 45 stuffies came with us, right? And my kids were like, hey, we're running out of room. We're too squished. I'm like, yeah, it's because you literally have 14 stuffies taking up the room of 7 small children. No wonder you don't have room. And so we went and we spent the day in Jasper with my mom and her sisters, and it was awesome. We had a really, really good time. It's a beautiful place. We went to Athabasca Falls, which was beautiful. But at the whole time that I was in Jasper, I was literally comparing it to Banff and Camera the whole time. Like, this is what's different about it. This is what's good about it. This is what I like more, all these things. And my mind was like, why am I in this mindset of comparing God's beauty to another place? Well, because we like to compare things. We like to compare. We want to see where we're at compared to somebody else. We want to see where their career is compared to ours, or their education. And we want to compare things. Why? Because comparing often will either make us feel better or worse than somebody. Right? It'll make us feel better. Hey, I have a better education than you. Nah, boo-boo, you know? That's what we sometimes do. We like to compare to one another. But the comparing attitude is something that is so important for us, I think, to think about, because it can be so dangerous. It can be so dangerous for us. So what is the attitude of comparing? I want to read what I wrote. It says this: the attitude of comparing is measuring yourself, your situation, or your season against something else. It shifts your focus away from God's faithfulness and produces insecurity, fear, and dissatisfaction. This is what comparing will do in our lives. It can lead us to a life filled with insecurity and fear and dissatisfaction with what we have and who we are. And this is a moment that the Israelites found themselves in Numbers chapter 13, verse 25. This is after they've sent the spies into the land to see what the land is like. This is what it says. It says, after exploring the land for 40 days, the men returned to Moses and Aaron and the whole community of Israel at Kadesh in the wilderness of Paran. They reported to the whole community what they had seen and showed them the fruit they had taken from the land. This was their report to Moses. This is a good report. We entered the land you sent us to explore, and it indeed is a bountiful country, a land flowing with milk and honey. Here is the kind of fruit it produces. But the people living there are powerful, and their towns are large and fortified. We even saw giants there. The descendants of Anak. The Amalekites live in the Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea and along the Jordan River. But Caleb tried to quiet the people as they stood before Moses. Let's go at once to take the land, he said. We can certainly conquer it. But the other men who had explored the land with them disagreed. We can't go up against them. They are stronger than we are. So they spread this bad report about the land among the Israelites. The land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. All the people we saw were huge. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. Next to them, we felt like grasshoppers, and that's what they thought too. This is this moment with Israel where there's this moment of comparison, right? They're comparing themselves, these spies that went out, they're comparing themselves to the giants and the enemy that they saw before them. They said that we felt like grasshoppers, and other translations say we were like grasshoppers in their eyes, and so we became grasshoppers in our own eyes. They said that that's how they saw them, and so they saw themselves as small. This wasn't a comparison about their past. This was a comparison of their future. It was just a comparison of how they saw themselves compared to the enemies that God had laid before them, who had put before them these enemies that were giants. They saw themselves as small and saw themselves as inferior. And this is what the comparing attitude can do. It can make us feel less than or more than. But what I want to do is I have 3 signs of the attitude of comparing that I want to go through with us this morning. 3 signs that maybe this is an attitude that's maybe crept its way into our own hearts or our own minds. And so number 1, the first sign of this is you feel smaller than what God has called you to. You ever feel that way? You're like, God, why did you ask me to have this career? I don't feel like I'm good enough. I don't feel like I'm educated enough. I don't feel like I have what it takes. I don't think I can do it. Do you ever feel that way? Maybe you accept a position and you step into it you're like, I'm way over my head. You ever feel that way? I remember when I first started as a lead pastor of our church, that's exactly how I felt. I was 26 years old and I thought, man, I'm way over my head. I'm way over my head. And this is what happened. We feel smaller than what God has called us to. This is what comparing can do in our lives. So comparison, what did it do? It distorted their identity. It saw themselves as small, and so what did they become? They became small. Their enemy was bigger than their promise. They saw this enemy, these giants are bigger than our God. That our God could part the sea. He could bring bread from heaven. He could do all these things, but I don't think he's good enough or strong enough to take these giants. They saw themselves as small. But God had called them to something bigger, to promised land, the land that was promised. That's what they call it, promised land. But they didn't feel like they had what it took to get there. Right in Numbers chapter 13:33, we just read this. We even saw giants there. The descendants of Anak. Next to them, we felt like grasshoppers. And that's what they thought of us too. God had called them to this new land, out of Egypt, into this new land. So what does this comparing attitude look like? What does it mean? What does it look like for us to feel smaller than what God called us to? It might be a feeling of inadequacy. Maybe it's just believing you're not enough. Maybe losing confidence because of what you see around you. That might be the attitude in our own minds, a sign of saying, yeah, I feel inadequate. I don't feel like I'm good enough. Believing that I'm not enough, losing confidence because of what I see around me. The promise is that I don't see the promise. All I see is the giants. Some of the language you might recognize might be, I can't do it because I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not big enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not educated enough. We start to believe these things. This is what comparing does. They should do it because I'm not good enough. It shouldn't be me, it should be them. And God's saying, no, I've called you to do this. Like when God called Moses, he said, go. He said, I can't even speak properly. God's like, I'm the one who makes your mouth speak. Like, go. We don't feel like our future is possible because the obstacles to get there are too big. The giants are too big. See, comparison, it shrinks our perspective of ourselves and our perspective of God. It shrinks ourselves and it shrinks our God. This is one of the biggest things that stopped them from actually entering the promised land, was this feeling of inadequacy. Number two is that you focus more on obstacles than opportunities. The spies saw giants instead of the promise. The giants probably weren't hard to spot. I have a picture of Dwayne Johnson with Kevin Hart. Dwayne Johnson's a big human being. He's 6'4", 260 pounds. Kevin Hart is a smaller human. Dwayne Johnson's a big guy. I want to go to the next photo. This is Dwayne Johnson next to Shaquille O'Neal. Do you know who looks small? Dwayne Johnson. He's next to Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley. Shaquille O'Neal's like, what, 7'3"? And these giants, they say, may have been 9 feet tall. So you think like Dwayne Johnson, which I would think like in our culture, like that's like the guy, you know? But he's small. And this is what the Israelites saw. They saw these giants. They saw these huge human beings. They saw this powerful, beautiful land. But all they saw when they came back, they said, this is good, but this is the problem. And then they spread this report, said, hey, this is the problem. The giants are too big. We're too small. Let's just walk around the wilderness and wait because this promise is too much for us. We can't do it. Giants aren't hard to miss. Problems in our lives are not hard to miss. It's easy sometimes just to see the problem, right? The giants tower over us. They make our defeat seem imminent. You might look at your future and all you might see is the obstacles. All you might see is the giants. You might just see these giants towering over you and you say, I'm like a grasshopper in the eyes of these giants. Numbers 13 verse 28. But the people living there are powerful, and their towns are large and fortified. We even saw giants there. The descendants of Anak. We can't do this. The land is beautiful. It's everything we could dream of. The future is going to be amazing, but there's a problem and we can't actually solve it. So what does this attitude kind of look like maybe practically when we think about focusing on the obstacles more than the opportunities? It might mean that in our lives, what do? We obsess over the problems. There's always a problem. We got to solve the problem. What's the problem? We obsess over the problems rather than the solutions or rather than the opportunities. Or maybe you might see this in your own mind. You might assume defeat before even trying. You might not even try things because you think, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not even going to try. It's easier for me to not try than for me to fail. We think trying and failing is worse than not trying and staying comfortable. Another way it might look in our lives is we let fear dominate our future and let fear dominate our vision, that every time we look to the future, we just are filled with fear, worry, and anxiety. The language you might see in your own life might be, I'm not even going to try, right? Because I'm going to fail. Or maybe nothing seems to go right in my life. Everything seems to go wrong. There's always a problem. And guess what? There is always a problem. You might have these attitudes in your life. I have nothing to be hopeful for. This is what comparison can do in our life because our future seems bleak. And comparison makes obstacles look bigger than God's promise. So we think the giant is bigger than the land. And guess what? The giant's not bigger than the land. You ever seen a city block? The giant wasn't the same size as a city block. And they were promised a whole land filled with milk and honey, but the giants were too big. The promise was too small. And number 3 is this, is that you let fear shape your perspective. The spies sent fear through the camp. They spread this fear through the camp. They saw the promised land. They saw its provision. They saw its beauty. They saw how vast and amazing it was. But in their minds, they had already decided they were too small. And they wanted to make sure that everyone knew that the mission from God was impossible. Caleb said, let's go at once. Let's go right now. Let's do it right now. And then they say, no. It's impossible. We can see it in verse 30, right? But Caleb tried to quiet the people as they stood before Moses. Let's go at once to take the land. We can certainly conquer it, but the other men who explored the land disagreed. We can't go up against them. They're stronger than we are. You know what's powerful is fear. Fear will make us do things we never thought we'd do. Make us say things we never thought we'd say. Fear will make us do things we never thought we would do. They can cause us to lose things we never thought we'd be willing to give up. This is what fear can do in our life. It's powerful. What does this look like in our lives? Well, it might mean that everything you're assuming is negative, right? You ever get an email from your boss like, hey, let's meet tomorrow at 10, and you're like, I can't even sleep because I'm overthinking what this meeting's about. And you think you're going to get fired, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, we want to give you a raise. You're like, why did I spend all night not sleeping and worrying when I should have just left it in God's hands? We do this, right? We have these negative assumptions about everything. And all of our conversations even are fear-based. And we're expecting failure. And that's dangerous. That's what comparison does. It makes us expect that we're going to fail. And you know what happens when we often expect we're going to fail? Do you know what often happens? We often fail. I remember when I was a kid, I wasn't very good in school. I wasn't the best in school. But I had this confidence because I have ADHD, and so I do everything last minute. And often I did a decent grade. Would I have done better if I prepped? For sure. One night, I hadn't even started reading a book. We had a book report due the next day for this book. I didn't even start reading the book yet. And so I started reading the book. I got this report, and I did okay on it. But I was expecting not to do well. I was expecting that maybe I was going to fail, and so I didn't even really try. But that's what happens when comparison gets a hold of our life and fear gets a hold of our life. We expect failure. Language from this attitude you might recognize in your own life is that my coworkers are just out to get me. My boss hates me. But that's the way we've always done it. We can't do that. We can't change that. If we do that, everything will fall apart. If we change this, it's going to destroy everything. See, comparison will turn possibility into fear. That the possibility, the outcome we see is always negative. The possibility of a great future seems impossible. And so we don't even try. So the question is, what do we do when we see this attitude in our own lives? What do we do when comparison starts to creep into our hearts and our minds? Because you might think, I'm seeing this maybe in my own life, in my own situations. How do we combat the comparing attitude? Well, we need to learn to master contentment. That we move from comparing to being content. I think our generation is not very content. You know how I know? Because we're always trading in cars to try and get the next one. We're trying to make sure that our house is big enough and we have enough stuff. I'm telling you, when I got home from that weekend trip just like 3 days ago, and I emptied my car, and I'm like, man, there's so much stuff in my van, let alone in my whole house. And we're always getting new things and stuff, and we got to master contentment. See, the attitude of contentment is trusting God with who He made you to be. It's trusting God with where He has you. And it's trusting God with what He's called you to do. It finds peace in God's provision instead of constantly measuring against something else. That's what contentment does. It stops this measuring against other people. That's what we do. We measure and we compare to one another. So what are 3 signs that we're growing in contentment? Number 1 is that you see yourself through God's perspective. This is the most important thing I think we can take away, is that we see ourselves through the lens that God sees us. Joshua and Caleb, what did they see? They saw promise. They saw the land rather than the giants. They came back, they're like, let's just go now. They're like, we don't even need to prepare for this. Let's just go right now, at once. The other guys are like, no, we got to talk about this. We got to pray about this. We got to spread this across the camp. They're like, let's go right now. Let's go at once. They saw the promise while everyone else saw giants. They saw the opportunity. They saw the future, and they wanted to conquer. They knew that it was possible. They had seen it, they had tasted it, and they wanted what God had promised them. And we see their attitude in the next chapter, in Numbers chapter 14, verse 8. And if the Lord is pleased with us, He will bring us safety into that land and give it to us. It is a rich land flowing with milk and honey. Do not rebel against the Lord, and don't be afraid of the people of the land. They are only helpless prey to us. They have no protection, but the Lord is with us. Don't be afraid of them. They are helpless prey. That is a bold statement. That's a bold statement. The other people, they saw these giants that were impossible to defeat. They say they're just helpless prey. They have no protection. It's like, but they're 9 feet tall, Caleb. They're 9 feet tall. I don't even know what 9 feet is. I need a measuring tape. 9 feet tall. And Caleb's like, let's go now. Joshua's like, let's go now. They have no protection. They're helpless prey. How they saw these giants were like grasshoppers. Caleb and Joshua, they saw themselves as giants, and they saw their foe as grasshoppers. Let's just go squish them, and then we have the land. We got the milk and the honey, and it's going to be awesome. They're like, why aren't we going? Helpless prey. Shows this boldness and this faith that they had, and that God is bigger. See, they knew who they were because they knew who their God was. They knew who God was. They knew how powerful and amazing our God is. They'd seen Him do it before. They knew that they would see Him do it again. So what does this practically look like in our life if we're growing in the attitude of contentment? Well, it's that our confidence is rooted in God. Our confidence isn't rooted in our career. Our confidence isn't rooted in our income. Our confidence isn't rooted in what we do. It's not rooted in our family. Our confidence is rooted in God. That way, if things get taken away, we can still be confident. It also looks like security instead of insecurity, that we're secure in who we are. This is hard. It's hard sometimes to be secure in who we are. We don't like how we look. Or we don't like how we talk. And you know what's funny? You know, with speaking, has anyone ever heard your own voice and be like, I hate the sound of my own voice? I hear my own voice literally weekly. I'm so used to it. And I still am like, oh, I don't like that. Yuck, you know? People listen to me talk. But it's just security in who we are instead of insecurity. And also it's believing that God can use you. Do you believe that? That God can use you. I don't care if you're a baby or a grandmother. God can use you. God's not done using you. You can make an impact wherever you go. God can use you. This is the language you might start to recognize in your life when you're growing in contentment. Is you're secure in who you are. You believe that God can use you and you're confident. The language you might start to recognize when you see this happen in your life is you might even start quoting scripture like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You might not just have that tattooed on your arm, but you might actually believe it. You might actually believe that you can do all things. You might even start to believe that you are strong, not because you are strong, but because God is strong and He's in you. You might start to see yourself as a leader, person who can make an impact, person who can change an environment, a person who can raise a family to grow and know Jesus, that you are a leader. You might start to believe that about yourself. See, contentment comes from trusting God's view of you. We need to know how God sees us. And I share this all the time. If we don't know how God sees us, it's going to be really hard to see how God sees us. You might be like, what? Well, what I'm saying is if God sees us a certain way, but we don't know that, we're not going to know it. I don't know how to make it simpler. If you don't know something, you don't know it, you know. How do we get to know it? Spend time in scripture. Spend time in prayer. The Oilers are out of the playoffs. You got time. The Canadians lost 8-3 yesterday. My aunt's from Montreal. She cried all night. I'm just joking. See, we will be more content when we know how God sees us. Because it also shows us who we're not. And it's okay to not be something. There's contentment in knowing who we are. We will realize that we have everything we need to fight the battle before us. Number 2 is you focus on God's promise more than your problems. How are we going to know we're growing in contentment? The promise is what we focus on, not the problem. See, contentment, it keeps our perspective rooted in our faith. It's faith over fear. It promise over problems. We're really good at pointing out problems. We love, it's like we talked about last week. We love complaining, and we love to talk about our problems. And guess what? You have problems. I have problems. There's things in my life that are hard. And we love to talk about them. And there's nothing wrong with talking about your problems, right? Like, get help, get support. There's problems. But if that's all you see is problems, I think there's a problem. We love to complain about everything, yet we aren't good at celebrating the wins and the things that go well. We don't like to celebrate the good things, but we really like to celebrate the problems. See, God has given each of us a gift, and He's given each of us something to share. This is what it says in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1-2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to live of faith, to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. This is going to take confidence. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting Him, He endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now He's seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. This is what it takes to see the promise, to be willing to fight the good fight and finish the race, to keeping our eyes on Jesus. That's how we do it. We keep our eyes on Jesus. What does this practically look like in our lives? Well, we see hope instead of fear. Are you hopeful about your future, or are you fearful? If you want to see contentment grow in your life, you're going to be hopeful about your future, not just scared. It's this idea that we have faith-filled thinking, that our thinking is faith-filled and it's big and it's grand, and we know that God is going to do something powerful. And it's our perspective shaped by God's character. See, the language you might start to recognize in your life is that you might even have an attitude of, we can do that. We can try that. That sounds like a great idea. We don't have to be afraid. Let's go and do it. Let's go at once. God is the one leading us. It's so possible. These are some of the thinking that might go on in your life. Let's dream and let's do it. You might be excited about your future and what God's going to do. See, contentment keeps his eyes on God, not just the obstacles. You know, in some emergency response or obstacle training, when they go for driving, especially in like an ambulance and first responders, what often they'll do is that the instructors will place or throw dummies in the road to try so that the drivers can try and avoid. Because if you're driving an ambulance, fire truck, one of these first responders, you never know exactly what it's going to look like. You have to be a pretty good driver. And so sometimes they'll throw dummies on the road or in front of the vehicle for people to try and avoid. The natural instinct of humans is to stare at the obstacle and stare at the object because you're afraid of hitting it. So you stare at it like, I don't want to hit that. Do you know what you most of the time are going to hit? The obstacle. So the technique that they teach you is that you don't focus on what you're trying to avoid. Focus on the open path where you want the vehicle to go. The obstacle is just an obstacle. Just go around it. Because drivers, they tend to steer toward whatever has their attention. That's what happens. We got to learn how to be content. And number 3 is this, is that you celebrate what God has given instead of craving what others have. See, contentment, it releases the constant need to measure ourselves and compare ourselves to other people and other people's lives. We don't even sometimes see the blessings in our lives. We see them get the promotion, we're like, what about me? We see them go on the vacation, we're like, what about me? We see them get this, we're like, what about me? And then we look around us and all the blessings in our life have now become just things that we have rather than blessings because we don't have enough. See, celebrating is a big piece of our faith that is often overlooked. I talked about this last week. If you look through like Jewish culture and Israel history, they celebrated all the time. They had feasts all the time. They ate dinners. I think half the time you see Jesus in the New Testament, what was he doing? He's eating with his friends. They're on a fire cooking fish, or they're at a fishing boat and they're eating. He feeds 5,000. That they celebrate a lot. And it's something we don't tend to do in our lives, is celebrate the wins and celebrate what God is doing. And guess what? If we don't celebrate it, we often don't even realize we have it. Philippians 4:11 says this, not that I was ever in need. This is Paul. For I have learned how to be content with whatever I have. That's where I want to get in my life. Where I will be content with whatever I have. This is Paul writing, guy who's shipwrecked, guy who's in prison. Imagine being in prison for something you shouldn't even be in prison for, really. And you're like, I'm content. The other inmates would be like, I don't like that guy. He's content with whatever he has. That's what I want my life to look like, to be content. No matter what the situation, no matter all of it, I will be content in what I have. What does this look like in our lives? What's practically look like? Well, it's peace in your current situation. I don't know exactly maybe what you're going through. I don't know maybe what transition you're facing. I don't know. But if you're going to see contentment thrive in your life, peace should be present. And the next one is gratitude for your calling. Are you grateful for what God has called you to do, or you just wish you had a different calling? Are you grateful for what God has called you to do? Maybe right now, maybe it's a season where God has called you to be a mother, or called you to be a father, or called you to be a CEO, or called you to be this, called you to be that. Are you content, and are you grateful for what God has called you to do? What does it also look like? It looks like freedom from constant comparison. Yeah. It's freedom from constantly trying to measure up to somebody else. Constantly trying to be like somebody else. It's freedom from that, and that is so much more peace that will come. Now, language you might start to recognize coming out of your mouth or in your mind is, wow, I'm so happy for you, but not in a sarcastic way. Not like, wow, I'm so happy for you, you know. Or might you be starting to say, people who get something that you want, you say, I'm so proud of you, I'm so happy for you. Man, you work so hard for that. I know you have a brand new truck with cooling seats and cooling steering wheel, but I'm so content with my 2004 Corolla. I'm so content, I'm happy. See, contentment frees you from meeting someone else's life to feel fulfilled. God has given you the life you have for a reason. We need to stop trying to be somebody else and live somebody else's life. Make the best of what He has given you. Pursue the big things He has for you. We were not created to live lives on comparison, yet the first murder in human history happened at like the third or fourth person. Over what? Comparison. God said, I like this, I don't like this. And he's like, well, I'm going to get rid of the problem, and just kills his brother. It's like fourth human. We're not created to live lives on comparison. We need to live our lives full of contentment, to live where we go, and to love where we go, to love what God has given us, to be grateful for what we have and be content. It's not just contentment in what we have, but it's in who we are, that we're content in who God has called us to be, even if it's for a season. The truth is, you'll never be me, and that's a good thing. And I'll never be you. God created each and every one of us to be different with unique gifts and unique talents. And our job is to tap into what God has created us to be and live the life of the potential he's called us to have. You're never going to live the life God has called you to live if you're trying to be somebody else, if you're trying to go somewhere else, if the giants are too big in front of you. To learn to be content and trust God as he leads us through. That's what it looks like in our life. Sometimes this attitude of comparison tends to creep in, especially in times of transition. We compare our present to our past, and our past to our future, and our present to our future. And there's all these comparisons. Rather than saying, God, I trust you. I trust you that no matter what it's going to look like, it's going to be good because you're in it. To learn to live these lives of contentment with who we are. And that's hard. I think sometimes, at least for me, it's easier to live a life of contentment with what I have and harder to live a life of contentment with who I am. Why? Because we see our biggest flaws. We see our biggest weaknesses. We see our biggest mistakes. Some of the things that nobody else sees, nobody else even knows about. We live in this place where we see it all, and sometimes that breaks us when we see how broken we are. But the truth is, we got to lift our eyes away from our problems and lift our eyes to our Savior. And that's where our identity comes from, is who he is. Just because you failed, it doesn't make you a failure. He loves you and he wants what's best for you. And we got to learn to trust him with our future. Our takeaway today is this, is comparison makes you feel too small for the promise God has given you. But contentment keeps your eyes on God instead of the giants in front of you. That's what it's like. Comparison, it makes us feel small. It feels too small for what God has called us to do. God called them to the promised land. They said, now we're grasshoppers. These guys are giants. But contentment, it keeps our eyes on God instead of the giants. Because the giants become grasshoppers when we are walking with our Father. The big problems become small. But what we often do is we make the small problems become big. We got to learn to trust God with our future. And so we are excited for what God's going to do. And again, I don't know where you're at and what God's doing in your life, maybe what God's leading you to or leading you away from, whatever it is. I want to encourage you, trust God. Trust him. Don't be like the spies who came back and said, it's going to be good, but it's too much work. We're going to die if we try. Be more like Caleb and Joshua who said, let's go right now. Let's go once. We just got back. I'm ready for more. They wanted to taste more. They wanted to see more of it. I would encourage you, let's be content. Let's be grateful. Let's be content. And let's follow God where he leads us and trust him as we go. Father, I thank you for this moment where we get to even just examine our own hearts. Examine our own minds as we think about maybe there's parts of my life where I'm stepping into comparison. Or I'm looking at what you've called me to be and you've called me to do, and I think, man, I wish it was this or I wish it was that. I've been doing this for so long. Whatever it is, God, I pray that you help us learn how to be content and live the life you've called us to live with joy and excitement, and that we will know that we can trust you with our future because you are in it. And so, God, I thank you that we will follow you as you go, that we will trust you as we go, and we thank you that you're doing something powerful in our midst. In Jesus' name, amen.